Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we dive into the enchanting and distinct universe of Wes Anderson's films, exploring the colors, the eccentricities, and the exquisite details that define his work. Let's begin with your opening thoughts. Amelia, would you start us off?
It's a pleasure, Hal. Anderson's films are like watching a painting come to life. They carry a sort of timeless whimsy that transports you to a different world entirely.
Amelia, while I admire his aesthetic, I have to say, sometimes it feels like style over substance. His films are meticulous, no doubt, but at times that meticulousness seems to quash the storytelling.
Lenny, I see your point, but isn't that visual storytelling in itself? Anderson's style gives us a lens to view the past, not just with fondness, but with a critical eye as well. The interplay between form and function in his work is certainly fascinating. There's an intentional design that plays into the emotional resonance with the audience.
His films certainly do resonate, jazz, and it's not just the visuals. The historical context Wes Anderson evokes add layers of meaning that warrant deeper reflection.
True, Mick. The visual intricacy is matched by rich thematic undercurrents. Izzy, given your diverse academic insight, how do you approach his cinematic language?
Hal, Wes Anderson speaks in a cultural shorthand. His films are brimming with references that challenge my appreciation for history and art, yet there's always freshness to his perspective.
And perhaps that's why he polarizes audiences. His distinct visual and narrative style is what makes Anderson Anderson. There's a brilliance in that singularity.
Well, I can't argue with his uniqueness, Amelia. Whether you adore his work or not, Anderson certainly has marked his territory in the film landscape.
As much as I appreciate the debate, let's be mindful that Anderson's craft deserves our keen observation, not just criticism or praise for its own sake.
Jazz, precisely. Anderson crafts his world with a deliberate hand, creating films that aren't just watched but experienced.
An experience indeed, and an excellent starting point for the rest of our discussion. Shall we delve deeper into these experiences and explore the symmetry and aesthetics in Anderson's cinematography next? Welcome, everyone. Today we delve into the striking visuals that define Wes Anderson's films. Amelia, your broad expertise in arts must give you an interesting angle on his use of symmetry and aesthetics.
Indeed, Hal, Wes Anderson's approach to cinematography is akin to stepping inside a living Art Nouveau piece. His dedication to symmetry is relentless and purposeful. It brings a sense of order and beauty that's rare in modern cinema.
But don't you think there's more to it than beauty? His symmetry, his framed compositions, they do more than dazzle. They create a psychological space that's unique to his storytelling. It's like we're viewing the world through a meticulously organized lens, reflecting the inner worlds of his characters.
That's a romantic view, jazz, but let's not gloss over the fact that sometimes form overshadows function. I appreciate Anderson's eye for detail, but endless symmetry can become a gilded cage. Where's the room for chaos, the unexpected, that which makes stories breathe?
I hear you, Lenny, and the balance is crucial. But those very constraints you mention, they magnify the instances when Anderson breaks away from his own rules. The impact is all the stronger for the rarity.
I wonder if that symmetry isn't an essential narrative tool for him. It's not a superficial flourish, it's a language. Through that visual symmetry, he often mirrors the inner balance or imbalance of his characters.
Mick, you've made a compelling point. It's not just an aesthetic choice, it becomes symbolic. His highly structured visuals serve to underscore the emotional and narrative arcs. There's a resonance between what we see and what the characters experience.
Granted, the symmetry does speak on multiple levels, but does it always serve the story, or does it sometimes serve only itself?
More often than not, it centralizes our focus, paving the way for deeper connection with the scene. Also, the balance you criticize, Lenny, gives his films an unmistakable identity.
Doesn't this conversation boil down to subjectivity in viewing art? Some find resonance in symmetry, while others seek the chaos of nature. Anderson just happens to invite us into his symmetric world, and it's a fascinating one at that.
Agreed, jazz, and it's that very invitation that sparks debates like ours. An invitation to a world where every frame could hang in a gallery. yet we're discussing the intention behind the painting.
A dynamic start to our discussion. It seems we all appreciate the intent and artistry in Anderson's approach, even if we debate its dominance over narrative elements. We now turn to the role of nostalgia in Wes Anderson's films, a recurring theme that genuinely shapes his narrative universe. Mick, perhaps you could kick us off with your historical perspective on this.
Absolutely, Hal. What strikes me about Anderson's films is his deliberate invocation of a bygone era, specifically the late 20th century. His settings, objects, and character names often reference a period of time that seems more innocent, more vibrant.
That innocence is crucial, isn't it? It's a sort of longing for a past that probably never was as perfect as we imagine. I always feel Anderson handles this with a careful balance of reverence and critique.
I'd like to add to Izzy's point that this very tension between the past's idealized form and its reality contributes to the fabric of Anderson's storytelling. It's a clever use of nostalgic elements.
Well, I might have to challenge that a bit. While I appreciate the craft, I question whether this nostalgia is merely aesthetic or if it's truly serving the story's depth. Sometimes it risks being mere pastiche.
I see your point, Lenny, but consider how nostalgia in Anderson's films often reveals a character's longing or personal loss, which does propel the story forward. Izzy, you're onto something. The nostalgia isn't just for show, it's central to the character's emotional journey. It's powerful because we as viewers are wired to respond to nostalgia. It's a shared human experience.
Jazz, you're right. The music, the decor, all of these elements resonate on a very personal level. Wes Anderson isn't just conjuring history, he's weaving it into the very essence of his narrative.
And that's precisely what elevates it past simple imitation. The artful way Anderson infuses a sense of nostalgia enables us to view our present and future through a lens informed by the past.
I suppose when you put it that way, I can concede there's a depth to his approach. Though, the line between nostalgia and a sort of stylistic crutch can be quite thin, can't it?
Lenny, your skepticism does serve as a vital foil to our otherwise harmonious praise. Let's not forget that critics and filmmakers alike have often engaged in a dance around the allure and pitfalls of nostalgia. Anderson's work simply offers a contemporary stage for this age-old dialogue.
And within that stage, Anderson challenges us to question our collective memory and our interpretations of history, something that, as a curator, I find endlessly fascinating.
The man uses nostalgia not just as an end, but as a means to explore our relationship with the past, a mirror to our contemporary societal concerns, which I think is a stroke of genius.
That synthesis of old and new is a kind of storytelling alchemy that few directors manage quite as skillfully as Anderson. With his unique cinematic language, he reaches across generations.
Well put, Mick. It's clear that Anderson's complex ballet with nostalgia elicits varied but passionate responses. Let's carry these thoughts as we continue our discussion on the family dynamics present in his work. We must now turn our attention to the intricate family dynamics and the portrayal of dysfunction in Wes Anderson's films. It seems he uses the family unit as a microcosm for larger societal issues. Izzy, would you care to illuminate this theme further?
Absolutely, Hal. Anderson doesn't just show us family, he dissects it. His films often reflect on the fractures within the family unit, tapping into the zeitgeist of our times. The Royal Tenenbaums, for instance, is a meditation on the simultaneous love and resentment that binds a family.
Indeed, Izzy, and there seems to be a psychological underpinning to Anderson's families. If we look at the Tenenbaums through a Freudian lens, Royal himself could be seen embodying the did, acting on impulse, while Etheline represents the superego, with all her structure and rules.
While the psychological basis is compelling, Jazz, I sometimes find Anderson's families border on caricature, which troubles me. Is this an insightful examination, or just quirky for the sake of quirkiness?
Well, Lenny, isn't family often a tapestry of quirks bonded by blood and history? I find Anderson's families to be exaggerated yet oddly truthful mirrorings of real life, reflecting the absurdity and complexity of familial bonds.
Good points all round, but let's not forget the societal lens here. Anderson's families often represent a falling from grace, a loss of aristocracy or fame. There's a poignant social commentary on the shifting American dream.
Intriguing perspective, Mick. Izzy, what societal implications do you perceive in Anderson's films?
It's like he's holding up a critical mirror to us all, isn't it? The families in Anderson's films, with their outdated values clinging on to past glory, signal a broader cultural reluctance to adapt to changing times.
And yet, there's an endearing quality to this reluctance, shaping a bittersweet nostalgia, don't you think?
That nostalgia might be the draw, Amelia. And speaking of adaptation, it's fascinating how Anderson's characters often pursue individual quests, yet yearn for communal acceptance. The dichotomy of isolation and belonging, it's at the heart of these familial portrayals.
I'd argue that the individual quests overshadow any genuine sense of community. Anderson's families seem to operate in a vacuum, disconnected from the broader society.
Lenny raises a contentious point. Is there indeed a disconnect, or is it a deliberate focus on the insular world of the family? Izzy?
Anderson paints with a focused brush, Hal intentionally bringing that intensity to the family environment. Though they are disconnected, their isolation serves to amplify their need for each other, flaws and all.
Yes, and perhaps through these dysfunctional units, Anderson is encouraging us to reflect on our own familial connections, a universal contemplation.
A fascinating exchange, as always. The genius of Anderson may very well lie in his ability to create these dysfunctional yet deeply familiar family worlds that resonate on both personal and societal planes. Let us ponder further as we transition to our next topic. Let's turn our attention to the nuanced language of color in Anderson's work. Color palettes in film can be realms of symbolic communication. Amelia, your thoughts on this?
Anderson's use of color is like a painter's careful choice of hues to provoke and emote. The pastels in the Grand Budapest Hotel invoke a sense of a bygone era, while the vibrant reds and greens in the Royal Tenenbaums draw us deeper into the characters' emotional states.
Indeed, Amelia. And it goes beyond aesthetics. These colors aren't random. They reference historical periods, echoing the visual language of those times. For instance, the mustard yellows in Moonrise Kingdom are so evocative of the 1960s.
There's also an emotional choreography at play. The palettes shift in tandem with narrative arcs, guiding our affective response almost invisibly. And it's that subtlety, that deftness of touch. Amelia, you're spot on. It's utterly painterly.
It's clever, yes, but is it not somewhat overwrought? At times it feels as though the tail is wagging the dog, the story serving the color scheme rather than the other way around.
But Lenny, isn't that a bit of the point? The color becomes a character in itself, a silent narrator directing our gaze and suggesting the emotional temperature of a scene.
Thank you, Jazz. Precisely what I see in Anderson's work. His approach invites us to see his films through a more artistic lens.
Understandable, but when form overtakes function, I dare say we risk losing our narrative thread in a maze of chromatic flourishes.
Let's not underestimate the viewer's connective process here, Lenny. The colors aren't merely ornamental, they're mnemonic devices, bookmarks for our senses.
Mick, any additional historical perspective on the weight of these choices?
Well, color in storytelling isn't new. Look at Technicolor's impact on the golden age of Hollywood. Anderson is simply threading that needle through a contemporary eye.
And in each threading, he revives a kind of nostalgia. Wouldn't you say, Mick?
Absolutely, Amelia. These colors evoke past film stock, production design, even period photography, bringing a richness to the narrative fabric.
As we consider those threads of color and narrative, it's clear they are deftly woven to create stories that resonate on multiple levels. Amelia, your point on the psychological imprint of these palettes opens a vibrant spectrum of interpretations. Let's delve into the literary elements that often surface in Wes's work. How do we see classic literary motifs unfolding in his screenplays?
Wes Anderson's fondness for literary motifs is clear. His films could almost be dog-eared pages from a whimsical storybook. His consistent inclusion of written material like the books in the Royal Tenenbaums or the letters in Moonrise Kingdom speak volumes about his intertextual approach.
Amelia, you're right on the storybook aesthetic. I feel that Anderson is reinterpreting classic literature through a modern lens. His narratives mirror the depth and complexity found in the books his characters are often shown reading or writing.
That's a stretch. Anderson's on-the-nose approach can simplify rather than complexify. We're missing the nuanced subtext that true literary giants weave into their narratives.
Lenny, while I see your point, I must disagree. Anderson doesn't simplify, he synthesizes. His scripts reference entire worlds of literary tradition, yet manage to converse with contemporary issues, making those motifs relevant today.
Precisely, Izzy. But let's not forget the visual parallels to literature. The chapters in the Grand Budapest Hotel emulate a novel's structure, each transition reminiscent of turning a new page.
These are all astute observations, but are these narrative gimmicks effective in narrative progression, or are they merely window dressing?
They're much more than window dressing, Hal. In Rushmore, the play within the film isn't just aesthetic. It's central to understanding Max's world and his love for theatricality. It's Anderson's homage to playwrights, and much like in Shakespeare's works, it holds up a mirror to the protagonist's soul.
And yet, Lenny has a point. The reliance on the motifs can be seen as a crutch. Are we indulging the director's whims at the expense of deeper storytelling?
Jazz, now you're getting it. While I appreciate the homage, when every frame comes off as an attempt to be a clever nod to literature, it gets tiresome. It can overshadow the film's emotional core.
A passionate defense, Lenny. But they're not just nods. They're part of a narrative language that Anderson has perfected. One could argue that his work rivals the richness of a novel.
And I'd argue that richness enhances the emotional experience, rather than detracts from it. It invites viewers into an Anderson universe where they can be both observer and participant in its literary fabric.
It's clear that there are various layers of appreciation for Wes Anderson's intertextuality. Does his literary storytelling suffer or benefit from this reason? The jury is still out, but the debate itself is a testament to the complexity of his work. Wes Anderson surely borrows from classic cinema, but let's talk about what elements he takes and how they shape his directing style. Mick, you seem quite eager to start us off.
Well, Anderson's meticulous frames remind me of the tableau style of Georges Méliès. His films are like intricate clockwork, each piece intentionally placed, much like the early pioneers of film.
That comparison is apt, Mick. Further, the way Anderson uses deep focus is a direct nod to Orson Welles and Citizen Kane. The complexity of his set designs allows everything to be in sharp relief, inviting viewers to explore every corner of the frame.
Granted, the influence is there, but let's not forget that classic cinema is steeped in storytelling prowess, not just aesthetics. At times, I feel Anderson is so caught up in his stylistic homage that he neglects the narrative.
On the contrary, Lenny, the use of these classic techniques serves Anderson well in creating a layered narrative. The visual style isn't merely decorative, it's integral to the storytelling, reinforcing themes and character emotions.
And it's that very integration of form and function that places Anderson in conversation with the greats. His use of slow motion, much like Scorsese's, punctuates moments with emotional weight while paying homage to the past.
The conversation brings up an interesting tension between homage and originality.
Yes, Hal, and that's where his genius lies. He isn't just replicating, he's recontextualizing. Take his use of the whip pan, for example. It has the energy of classic screwball comedies, yet it feels entirely fresh within his visual language.
I'll concede the point on the whip pan, Izzy. However, the risk of pastiche always looms. Does this homage add anything new, or is it retreading familiar ground with a fancier palette?
Lenny, I see your concern, but I argue that the familiar ground is where we find comfort. And in that, Anderson encourages a deeper engagement with film history and critique.
Indeed. And let's not overlook that through his distinctive use of mise-en-scène, Anderson revives a certain timeless quality that many contemporary films seem to have abandoned.
Agreed, Mick. It's a rare quality that invites both nostalgia and modern sensibility, making his films resonate across generations of viewers.
That's a lovely thought, Jazz. Would we then all agree that Anderson's influenced by classic cinema, yet innovates within his homage? Or perhaps, does he risk veering into mimicry?
It's a delicate balance, Hal. But in my view, Wes Anderson strikes it beautifully. And that's what makes his films a topic of discussion for cinephiles like us.
Let's turn our focus now to the music in Wes Anderson's films. The soundtracks are practically a character in themselves. Amelia, would you like to lead us with your thoughts on this?
Certainly, Hal. Anderson's soundtracks underscore narrative elements with such nuance that they become narrative devices. Take the Royal Tenenbaums. The music selection mirrors the emotional arcs of the characters, effectively conveying the unsaid.
That's an interesting point, Amelia. The music does more than just accompany the scene. Its interaction with the visual cues almost creates a sensory synesthesia. The Kinks in Rushmore, or So Georges' Bowie covers in The Life Aquatic, amplify this effect.
While the music is exceptionally chosen, I sometimes question whether the repeated use of obscure tracks is a form of cultural appropriation or a genuine nod to the music's origins. What's your take on that, Lenny?
Mick, I vehemently disagree with that. It's not appropriation, it's appreciation and curation. Anderson celebrates these artists and brings their work to a new audience. However, it's the uniformity of his choices that sometimes leaves me desiring more unpredictability.
I see where you're coming from, Lenny. Yet, I feel that Anderson's predictability is his trademark consistency. He educates his audience musically, and that regularity is how he connects with his viewers on an emotional level.
There is a fine line between those perspectives, indeed. Music can truly be a powerful connector.
And it's not just the emotional connection, Hal. Think about how Anderson's musical choices often break the fourth wall, like the use of Le Temps de l'Amour in Moonrise Kingdom. It pulls you into the scene as a participant, not just a spectator.
You've captured that beautifully, Amelia. It's immersive and often playful. Anderson invites the audience into his world with a wink and a nod through music.
I'm glad you brought up Le Temps de l'Amour, Amelia. It's a perfect example of where music serves as a bridge between cultures, and Anderson handles it with deft.
Agreed, Mick. And it's that bridge creating a shared experience, a universal language that speaks even when characters do not. What might seem like a Wes Anderson quirk is in fact a masterstroke of storytelling.
Now we approach a theme central not only to Wes Anderson's work, but to much of storytelling, the interplay between isolation and community. Izzy, your thoughts on how Anderson navigates these waters?
Wes has this uncanny ability to paint his characters as lone islands amidst a sea of communal expectations. Take the Royal Tenenbaums. Each character feels profoundly isolated despite the family ties.
That's a keen insight, Izzy. It's Anderson's dichotomy, isn't it? Individuals are etched sharply against these idyllic, often pastel communities. It's like he's framing the universal struggle to belong.
Absolutely. And the visual style amplifies this. Think of the wide shots in Moonrise Kingdom. Solo figures dwarfed by the majesty of nature or the exaggeration of the sets around them.
While I agree the stylistic elements underscore the theme, I question if the portrayal is more pastiche than genuine. Is the alienation too stylized to be relatable?
I'd push back on that, Lenny. Stylization doesn't negate genuine sentiment. Anderson's work is like a fable, using exaggeration to speak to very real human experiences.
Speaking of real experiences, let's not overlook the role these communities play in shaping identity. The Grand Budapest Hotel presents a fascinating microcosm of society.
Yes, Mick, and through that, Anderson seems to ask, which has the greater hand in our identity? The individual penchant for isolation or the communities we find ourselves part of?
And the portrayals aren't devoid of criticism either. There's often a satirical thread in these communal setups, poking at their pretense and sometimes hypocrisy.
Lenny, Amelia's point about identity raises an interesting issue, contrasting isolation and belonging. Do you see Anderson's communities as supportive frameworks or as confining structures for the individuals?
That's a critical distinction, Hal. In my view, Anderson's worlds are paradoxically both. They confine as much as they define. There's an undercurrent suggesting that true escape isn't possible, that we're all products of our environments to some degree.
It's almost Sartrean, isn't it? We're alone together,
fumbling for connection amidst the frameworks of community. Hell is other people, and Anderson's worlds are no less Sartrean for their whimsy.
We've all brought different lenses to this topic: psychological, aesthetic, cultural. Amelia, how do you see Anderson's interplay of isolation and community from the point of view of set design?
His sets are impeccably crafted worlds where characters find and lose themselves. They're practically characters in their own rights, shaping the narrative and informing our understanding of both the isolation and the interconnectivity of his characters.
Couldn't agree more, Amelia. The meticulous details give characters a playground for exploration, a place to be lost and found, repeatedly.
In essence, Anderson crafts a dialectic between the self and society. His characters' attempts to break from their isolated realities often lead them right back into the arms of community.
Indeed, members of our roundtable, we've dissected Wes Anderson's complex portrayal of isolation against the backdrop of community, or perhaps within its embrace, balanced expertly with his unique storytelling and aesthetic vision. Wes Anderson's set design presents a fascinating crossroads between the tangible world and the conceptual space within his narratives. Mick, you've often got an anthropological take on this. What's your read on his world building?
Indeed, Hal, Anderson's worlds are anthropological marvels. They reflect an era, a culture, often imbued with historical motifs. What intrigues me is his penchant for creating spaces that, while aesthetically arresting, reflect a society's attributes, its ideals and flaws.
True, Mick. Like a meticulous painter, Anderson crafts his sets with a sense of historical consciousness. The vivid Grand Budapest Hotel, for instance, isn't just visually delightful. It tells a story of a bygone Europe, much like a canvas from that time might have done.
While I echo that, I need to address the elephant in the room. His sets, as enchanting as they are visually, sometimes border on becoming spectacles that overshadow the deeper cultural narratives he's trying to present.
I see your point, Izzy, but still, there's a deliberate choice in that. Anderson is essentially manifesting his ideal of a world, an orderly, symmetric space, where even the off-kilter fits into a broader design, a sort of utopian vision.
I might have to disagree there, Jazz. Ideal, yes, but utopia? His worlds are too stylized, too obsessively detailed to reflect actual lived-in spaces. They're dioramas, not tangible worlds.
There you go, Lenny. Precisely. They are curated realities, but isn't that what makes them so unique? His worlds are not meant to mirror our own, but rather to encapsulate the essence of it, stripped down to its most interesting parts.
Amelia, you had previously mentioned parallels to painting techniques. Do you believe these set designs primarily serve an aesthetic purpose, or is there a deeper interplay at work?
Hal, the aesthetic is undeniably central, yes. Yet Anderson doesn't use it merely as a backdrop. The sets often reflect the inner workings of his characters. It becomes a storytelling tool, not just window dressing.
Rightly put, Amelia. The aesthetic tells as much of a story as the dialogue does, if not more. The stark contrast in the Royal Tenenbaums between the vibrant exterior and the crumbling family inside? Masterful.
And that's where I must interject. At times, don't you think Anderson risks his sets becoming pastiche? They can potentially take the focus away from the narrative, becoming an exercise in style over substance.
Exactly, Mick. His intention to create a unique world sometimes results in an insularity that doesn't always resonate. Realism takes a back seat, but then again, that's perhaps the charm we're looking for in Wes Anderson's universe.
Intriguing viewpoints all around. Let's hold that thought on the balance between style and substance. Izzy, your take on the practicality and plausibility of these spaces. Does Anderson achieve a harmony between the two?
Often, no. The worlds are plausible within their own narratives, but hardly practical. They're designed to serve a vision, certainly, but I wouldn't say they're spaces that offer the viewer any real form of escapism. The line between fantasy and reality is always evident.
Wouldn't that be the point, though? In a medium where anything is possible, Anderson chooses to construct these beautifully unrealistic worlds that are a foil to our chaotic reality.
Jazz makes an excellent point. Anderson's filmography does favor the imaginative over the real. It seems we've uncovered various layers to the uniqueness of Wes Anderson's set designs, their historical nods, aesthetic storytelling, and purposefully stylized realism. It reflects a singular worldview that clearly resonates with audiences, which says something about our collective desire for such meticulously crafted, imaginary spaces. Let's pivot to the role of the familiar faces in Wes Anderson's work. How do we feel this affects the fabric of his filmography?
Anderson's recurring ensemble is fascinating. It's like observing a repertory theater. When you see Bill Murray or the Wilson brothers pop up, there's an immediate, almost familial recognition that comforts the audience, don't you think?
Absolutely, and this recognition creates a unique dynamic. Audiences have a pre-existing emotional connection to these actors, which Anderson leverages masterfully.
I concur on the comfort, but doesn't it risk staleness? Fresh faces can bring fresh perspectives. Wes Anderson risks becoming predictable by not venturing out more with his casting choices.
We'll have to agree to disagree there, Lenny. I think it speaks to the history of performance. Shakespeare had his troupe, Kurosawa regularly used Mifune. It's about the depth these actors bring to the table, building a shorthand with the director and audience.
There's also the flip side. Familiarity can breed a lack of surprise. We anticipate certain actors playing certain types of roles. Do we ever worry Anderson's worlds suffer from this predictability?
Not at all, Jazz. I believe that the continuity of actors provides stability within his whimsical worlds. As a viewer, it's like coming home to friends.
Well put, Amelia. Though it might also be interesting to see how he would convey his artistic vision with an entirely new cast. Could he still captivate audiences without his usual suspects?
That's a provocative thought, Lenny. Yet, actors like Tilda Swinton and Saoirse Ronan have been integrated without disturbing the essence of what makes an Anderson film. Perhaps this blend of old and new is his sweet spot.
I appreciate the depth here. It seems we have a consensus that while there are risks to a recurrent ensemble, Wes Anderson manages to keep the story engaging. It adds continuity and nostalgia, though some caution against the potential predictability. We have reached the final stretch of our discussion today, and what a rich conversation it's been on Wes Anderson's impact and artistry. Let's bring together our final thoughts. Amelia, would you like to start?
Indeed, Hal. Anderson's Oeuvre is, without a doubt, a vibrant collection. Despite sometimes feeling overly stylized, it is his distinct visual language that sets him apart and leaves an indelible mark on cinema.
Amelia, you must acknowledge that there's more than just the visuals at play here. Anderson's films, with their unique storytelling and character construction, bring forth an unparalleled charm. Even I can't deny that.
Right you are, Lenny. The psychological depth we find in Anderson's narratives is captivating. His whimsical worlds might overshadow this aspect, but it's the human connection that truly resonates with the audience.
Jazz, while I agree on the human connection, I've critiqued throughout our discussion the romanticized lens through which Anderson views the world. It's a fine line between an homage to the past and a pastiche that doesn't critically engage with the periods it idolizes.
Mick, you've landed on a crucial point. However, Anderson's retrospective imagery fosters a dialogue with history rather than a mere reenactment. There's an intentionality behind his selections, offering both a critique and a celebration.
But with his film's stylized nature, do these issues not sometimes become secondary, Izzy? The aesthetic can overshadow the message, risking pretentiousness.
That's a strong point, Amelia. Now, as we think about the trajectory of Wes Anderson's work,
one cannot ignore the evolution of his ensemble casts, Hal. These familiar faces in varied contexts deepen our psychological ties with each new narrative exploration.
Precisely, Jazz. The recurring actors serve as a thread linking these imagined worlds, granting us a sense of continuity in Anderson's cinematic universe.
Despite that, I do wonder whether this familiarity could breed contempt or creative stagnation. It can be a double-edged sword, no?
It's a possibility, Mick. But thus far, each actor has brought layers of complexity to their characters, no matter the setting. What we perceive as limitation may very well be Anderson's genius in consistency.
As always, our discussions foster a wealth of interpretations. For my concluding thoughts, I see Wes Anderson's films as a mosaic. each piece reflecting a facet of human experiences and emotions that culminate into a cohesive picture. Thank you all for such a stimulating discourse.
And thank you, Hal, for guiding us through it. Wes Anderson's films, much like our conversation today, show that there's beauty and depth in examining and deconstructing the many layers of life and art.
I look forward to seeing how Anderson will continue to astonish us, inviting the audience into his carefully crafted worlds.
Agreed. His work has certainly secured a place in the pantheon of cinematic memory.
It's this enduring impact that beckons us back to his films time and time again, each viewing revealing new subtleties.
Riveting as ever, it will be interesting to see how future projects unfold. The mark of a true artist is to continue evolving.
An incredible journey we've traversed in understanding the depths of Wes Anderson's influence. Until our next roundtable, let us all keep pondering the imprints of cinema on the canvas of human endeavor.